Hello, welcome to Commonwealth News, episode 7. As always, I'm your host Daniel, and I got alongside me Laurence and also Simon. You can follow us on any social media at our new tag, which is
at CW News Online. That's at CW News Online.
And you may notice, if you're watching the video version, that we are in our new studio. We've invested a little bit of money to get to this situation, and we're quite pleased with it. We're going to do a little more, and we're looking to make some further improvements, especially with our video capabilities. If you'd like to help us, you can go to commonwealth-news.com, commonwealth-news.com, and on there's options to donate or subscribe to monthly fees, or even if you'd like some actual physical objects, we've got a store up and running. And the store, there's loads and loads of selections from hoodies, hats, mugs, t-shirts, a whole range of stuff, some jokey stuff. My personal favorite is I've made a AUKUS logo, and it's using all the free countries flags in the word AUKUS, and I really like it, and we popped it on some merch. It looks fantastic. So yeah, if you could help us in any way possible, we would really be grateful. Of course, there's a Black Friday sale on at the moment, and if you spend over a certain amount, you get free delivery. So make sure to check that out. Links are also in the description, of course. So on with this episode, very, very quick intro. Essentially, I'm very sorry this has been so delayed. We've had some issues with technical capabilities, and we've also had some issues, with us. We've been quite ill recently. Going backwards and forwards between us all with illnesses, so it delayed getting into the recording time, but we are now all healthy, good to go, and we're glad to be back. So this episode is going to be just a long-form interview, with Brent Cameron. You may have already heard of Brent Cameron. He is one of the creative minds behind CANZUK. He's wrote for various organisations about CANZUK. And he was also a quite successful author and has wrote the book, The Case for Free Trade Amongst the Commonwealth. So please check him out. We'll have a bit more of an introduction when we go to the interview. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this. We've got a lot more coming in the near future, so please stick around. Maybe hit that subscribe button and like the video if you enjoy it. But yeah, make sure to check this also out on the go on audio. You can go to Spotify, Apple, or Google, and you can get basically anywhere that you would listen to your podcast, you can get us. And if you want to see the video, you can watch it on our website or on YouTube. But yes, on with the interview then. Enjoy. So our guest today is Brent Cameron, who is an author and an article contributing writer for the Daily Globe and CANZUK International, amongst other things. Author of many books, including The Case for the Commonwealth Free Trade, and the second edition of that book is The Case for the Commonwealth Free Trade, Options for a New Globalization. Thank you very much for coming on.
Good to be with you.
Fantastic. So obviously your book fits nicely with our name. So why don't we start off with talking about the topic of your book? And without spoiling the plot of your book for our viewers and listeners, what is your case for free trade amongst the Commonwealth?
Well, simply put, if I'm tooling it down to an elevator pitch, you have a number of countries that have a shared history, shared attributes. They already have a tendency to trade more with each other at a higher rate than with the rest of the world. And I would think that at a time when we're very concerned about the future of Western liberal democracy, it's a network that's purpose-built for the 21st century.
So in your book, you spoke of the need to have a free trade deal amongst Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, and Britain if it left the EU. And you spoke of 2 phases. Could you tell us why it's important to have those nations as phase 1 and then later expanding that to a phase 2?
Right. I think that the primary reason for picking those countries is that my view is if you're going to have a really good workable trade relationship, you have to have a high degree of compatibility. We look at a lot of the trade relationships right now. It could be a matter of governance. It could be an issue of just in terms of the infrastructure that countries have dealing with one another. And the countries that were selected, which I nominally say is the first phase, were ones that I felt were purpose-built to get into it. Number one, high levels of GDP, high levels of development, very sophisticated mechanisms for governance. You have a very mature civil service and relatively low levels of corruption. So it's a better fit. My view in terms of opening beyond that phase and going to subsequent phases is really to allow for a gradual expansion based on the capabilities of a member state to meet what I think are the basic qualifications of being in a Commonwealth Free Trade Agreement. You see situations where countries that are not a really good match economically, when they get into a free trade deal, you get situations where there may be issues with loss of manufacturing jobs up and above what one would expect, massive trade deficits, and those things lead to a lot of political issues at home. And so I think that if you're going to build something like this, you want to make sure it's stable. You want to make sure it's going to last. And I think bringing people in too early in the process could actually be self-defeating.
That's fantastic. And for the benefit of the few viewers that we have that won't have read your brilliant book, how wide do you envisage this becoming, and over what sort of timescale do you think it would work?
I think there's a continuum. In the immediate, we would be, maybe looking at something in the order of CANZUK. And then, possibly building out to a country like, Singapore, where, it hits those economic and governance marks. In terms of how far could it go? Well, there's 54 jurisdictions in the Commonwealth. So in theory, it could go that high. Will it? Your guess is as good as mine. And how long would it take? Not entirely sure. I mean, the original version of the book, I started writing that more or less 18 years ago. So we're not there yet. Yeah. We're close. And thanks in part to the work that you guys and other people are doing. But I don't know. I'd like to see it in my lifetime, but who knows?
And do you think that free movement of capital, free movement of goods necessitates free movement of people?
I think it can. Now, Britain has had the experience of the EU where the two have gone cap in hand. But here in Canada, we have the experience of free trade agreements that are not connected to free movement. And I think that that's going to be the one thing that's unique in CANZUK, where Canada is the one country that has not had free movement as a component of any trade deal we've ever done in the past. We don't have free movement with the United States and Mexico, and there's no free movement in the CPP, the TPP, CPTPP. I can never remember.
It's a difficult one, isn't it?
Oh, just WXYZ. But we've never negotiated those types of terms where there's free movement. So that's new territory for us. I mean, we've done a lot in terms of free trade, and negotiating with the United States, it's big, but there's a lot that we could learn from Australia and New Zealand, from the Trans-Tasman. And then, there's an institutional memory in the UK with regard to how free movement works, because you did essentially have that in the European Union, although you had a whole bunch of other things, which we won't talk about.
Yeah. So this is what it interested me about your phased introduction of this, because of course one of the factors that undermined Britain's membership of the European Union is that it acted as a draw for cheap labour from the east of Europe. So, if you look at the migration figures, there weren't huge numbers of skilled Western Europeans coming to the UK. It tended to be drawing from the east of the EU, where wages were lower and comparatively, Britain had a higher wage, and that meant that big businesses weren't investing in more advanced machinery to increase productivity because it was cheaper to import cheap labor. So the two phases rather interest me, because in your phase one, they're countries with a similar standard of living, similar average wage. And so do you think that perhaps doing it in those stages would limit some of the negative draw effects that, for example, Britain's membership of the EU had?
I do. And you cite the GDP figures, and GDP figures are always, a little hit and miss, because if you're working it out to per capita, you can have a situation where you have a country that is bringing in a lot of resource revenue like oil. And on paper, they look really rich, but that doesn't trickle down to the average person. And so you could still experience those issues. From my perspective, and this is something that is sort of on my bucket list in terms of wanting to approach, it's how do you get the lesser developed members of the Commonwealth purpose ready for something like this? Because, there are those huge issues. I have a few ideas that I've been working on, and, I really hope to share those in the not too distant future. But for me, it's not so much about free trade. Free trade is important, but you also want fair trade. You want reciprocal trade. And it's interesting, back in the 1800s, Canada actually did have some proto-free trade agreements with the United States, but we called them a reciprocity treaty. So, inherent in that is the idea that you're going to treat each other equally. And we don't see a lot of that with some of the free trade deals. There's this idea that, we're just going to throw open the borders and see what happens. It's like any, I equate it to a marriage. There are people I know that are celebrating 50 and 60th wedding anniversaries, and then there are people that want a quickie divorce in Las Vegas after 3 weeks. It's still technically the institution of marriage, but depending upon who the parties are, it can work out very well or work out very badly.
Yeah, nail on the head there.
Yeah, fantastic. So did you kind of allude to a future book that you're thinking of writing? You said you got some ideas and you're not quite ready to share them. Is there potential of a third installment?
Always a potential. I'm a little bit reluctant because the problem is I'm going to make a commitment that I'm not sure. I think my process is I begin writing. And at some point in time, and maybe I'll give a little bit of a background on this original book. It came up on a road trip to Boston, Massachusetts, to visit a mutual friend. And I'm sitting in the back of a minivan with my 3-year-old son. And I'm just bored as heck looking at the scenery on the Massachusetts Turnpike. So, the brain starts to formulate an idea. And eventually I just went to the friend and said, hey, I got this really crazy idea. What do you think? And he's somebody who has been almost like a thesis supervisor for me. He's like an older brother and a really close friend in that. And the original idea is to just maybe write a discussion paper, wouldn't be more than 20 pages long. And then what happened was you're saying, well, wait a minute, I forgot to mention this. You put a little more in, and then you put a little more in, and then you read it and say, well, wait a minute, I left out this, and this. And you keep writing. And at one magic day, you open up the file, your Microsoft Word file, and you look at the page count, and it says 100. And then you say, holy crap, I've written a book. Yeah. You don't think you can write a book.
Yeah.
But if you keep writing in there, I've written a couple of novels and everything. So here's my sort of rule of thumb. If I can get the page count up to 100, it will have life as a book. If I can't get the page count to 100, it's not going anywhere.
You're struggling, aren't you? You're struggling to come up with words.
Yeah. So that's my little trade secret. I don't know how much of a trade secret it is, but that's how I fly.
I'm sure if any of us are planning to write a book, we'll bear that in mind.
It doesn't count if you just be like a monkey on a typewriter, just putting gibberish on for 98 pages. You actually have to be like
a page of good stuff each time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't leave 5 spaces between the lines either.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously you're a fan of CANZUK, you're a fan of the Commonwealth. As a Canadian, are you supportive of AUKUS, or are you jealous that we're essentially playing with your friend?
I am obviously very supportive. I would definitely like to see Canada involved in it. I mean, we already have, and just to a point, it's interesting because obviously we have some informal relationships with Australia in terms of military. It's more formalized with Britain in NATO. With the United States, we have NATO and we have NORAD. The one interesting thing is that NORAD is air defense, has absolutely nothing to do with naval assets. So, I know a few people that have felt wouldn't be a bad idea to build out NORAD into a naval component as well. Yep. And it's funny because AUKUS really would be a version of that, albeit it seems more focused on subs, but you already have all of these other agreements. And this is a good segue into CANZUK, because you'll have 4 or 5 countries coordinating on military matters, and they're all intersected by about 8 or 9 different treaties. And so you may have a situation where all of them are in a treaty, or 3 are in one, and another 3 are in another. It's mix and match. And this is a good segue into CANZUK, because a lot of people said, well, if Britain joins the TPP, well, then isn't there free trade amongst the 4 CANZUK countries? But it's not in the body of one agreement.
Yep.
So I think Canada getting involved in AUKUS would be great, because obviously we have this stretch of terrain in our north. We have the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
And some folks in Beijing have decided that China is now a near Arctic power. Now, I don't know how near to the Arctic you have to be a near Arctic power, but apparently that's a thing. And so, we don't have nuclear subs ourselves, and we have been improving our Arctic fleet. We have a icebreaker, the Harry DeWolf, that is doing a circumnavigation through that area. And it's on our radar screen, but the resources that have been put into it to this point and the political will, I don't think has been commensurate to the challenge. So, this is something that could help, because, and I do note that the Royal Navy has offered logistical support and some training support to our Navy, and some sort of sharing with regard to Arctic training. So that's really up our alley, and it would be perfect.
Is there concerns then of an Arctic war? So what you're saying, or just cold weather training?
I think it's more cold weather training. I'm sure that there would be some sort of, military exercises that would take place. And for us, sovereignty is not really a matter of worrying about a traditional invasion, as more as we have this large archipelago in the Arctic. And these are areas that if you want to assert sovereignty, you have to be able to, get to them. You have to be able to monitor behavior in that area. and you have to be able to get assets to that area. And, I'm not saying that somebody's going to come in and say, well, hey, the Canadians haven't been around for a while, so, let's plant a flag. I think we're beyond those days right now. But from a practical standpoint, if you assert sovereignty over a piece of territory, by definition, you have to be in a position to assert your national laws and take care of things like policing and defense. So if you don't have an official presence in that area, you're sovereign on paper, but not in a practical sense. AUKUS, if we were involved in AUKUS, I think that would help us a great deal.
With do you think there's becoming so actually a better way to put it is, so there's an ever increasing amount of separate agreements and potential agreements such as CANZUK and AUKUS. Would you like to see potentially a better or greater partnership amongst the Anglosphere instead of all these little agreements popping up here and there and everywhere? There's more of just one combined agreement. Right.
Yes, but with qualifications, and I should explain. I think that if you have a half dozen countries that are already working together to a high degree, and they're governed by as many agreements as there are countries, that's very inefficient. If for example, you have CANZUK countries working to different rules. I mean, there's free movement, and that's a good example because that's something that a lot of people are very interested in. If you're a citizen in CANZUK, how does that work? Australian to New Zealand, it's working under the Trans-Tasman rules. If you're a Brit going to Australia, it's going to work under another set of rules. If you're a Brit going to New Zealand and vice versa, it's going to work under another set of rules. And then, assuming that if we do, complete our negotiations with the UK on a more fulsome trade agreement and we put free movement in it, and I'm not sure our government is on that page yet, but that would be another set of criteria. I think like Game of Thrones, you need one to rule them all, or Lord of the Rings, you need one to rule them all, because it's just, you're going to be sitting there with this rule book saying, okay, so if it's a Kiwi and an Aussie, these are the rules, but if it's a Brit and an Aussie, these are the rules. It
gets a bit complicated. You see what you mean.
It makes work for bureaucrats, and it makes work for immigration lawyers, and it makes headaches for the rest of us.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It causes a lot more of an issue than maybe one combined one would be.
But to your point, building it out, I mean, there are going to be natural limits to how far you can build it out.
Yes.
Like, for example, we're talking the broader Anglosphere. I will hit a brick wall if it was ever going to be the United States. And I'm going to ignore my United Empire loyalist refugees from the American Revolution roots. I'm not going to take that easy bait. What I'm going to say is that the American political culture and how they define self-interest, they would not be interested in free movement. They just wouldn't. I mean, Canada is arguably the closest politically, geographically, culturally, demographically to the United States, and they would never do free movement with us. So, even if we had this group, there may be constituencies in the United States that would sign on to free movement, but I'm highly skeptical that it would go any more than just sort of a fringe opinion in certain circles in the U.S.
Yeah, I do see that. As obviously, they're quite a good fan of free trade, but definitely not free movement.
Yeah, there's great literature about the whole idea of American exceptionalism. And then if you're looking back to, and American scholars will always talk about George Washington's farewell speech at the end of his presidency. and not wanting foreign entanglements. And, they're very clear. When they get involved in something, it is for a reason, for a purpose, and their national interests are paramount in mind. So you take it for what it's worth. I mean, it works. I think it works with countries like ours because our interests are very well aligned. But I'm trying to remember the phrase that correlation is not causation. And I think that when you look at how the Americans view these things, that's always something to bear in mind.
Absolutely.
Talking about obviously working together, obviously we've seen the leaders of our great nations currently meeting at COP26. What are your views on climate change and the targets? Do you think they're achievable by the years they're setting out?
Well, if I was just going to give you a take, I'm not sure that everybody flying into Glasgow and and running the diesel generators to charge the electric vehicles is a good use of it. I'm sitting in Canada and you guys are sitting in the UK, and during the pandemic, there were a lot of summits that were done, over Cisco Connect or whatever platform they were using. And, Liz Truss was able to bang off a couple of dozen free trade treaties with jurisdictions around the world by simply talking into a computer screen. So, I'm sure that they're having fun there. I mean, I would love to be there. My mother-in-law was born in Dumfries in Kakubri, and so I would love to shill for a vacation in Scotland and tour around. Do I think it's going to actually make a difference? I'm not a climate skeptic. I'm a skeptic of plans because I do believe, and this is maybe a little bit of a cynical bent in me. I always think that people sort of put in all these Easter eggs in policies, government policy, where, we're going to do this great, wondrous thing, but we have to set aside money for overhead. And it's almost like when you look at charities where they say out of every dollar, every pound you give, there's like 5p that actually goes to feeding starving kids, and the other 95
can be really bad.
Goes into administration. That's not really arguing whether or not I believe in climate change. What I believe in is that bureaucrats love to bureaucrat, and people who amass power love their power and their perks and their private jets and their expense accounts. And I live in rural Ontario, Canada. I have 77 acres of woodlot that's sucking out some portion of the carbon that these people are generating as they're saving the planet. If they wanted to throw me a few bucks for my contribution to the cause, I'm more than willing to take it.
Lovely. So with this going on, do you see, obviously China and India, they're setting much longer targets, and whether they actually ever start reducing their emissions is another thing, let alone what their targets are going to be. Do you see there essentially being a CANZUK agreement relating to a CANZUK type agreement relating to the environment up in our countries?
I think yes. And the reason I say that is because I think that it's going to, if we were to have a CANZUK free trade deal, it would probably have elements of it built into it. And so I think you'll get it anyway. I think that there will be discussion about Australian coal and oil sands in Alberta and various other things. I'm not sure what the lowest common denominator would be. I mean, we all have our perspective as to how it would play out, but once you get into a room full of diplomats and negotiators, the numbers are going to move around. But it seems the political trend right now, and this is something that the Conservative Party in the UK and the Liberal Party in Canada, and obviously the government of Jacinda Ardern. I don't know how much in terms of Australia, but at least 3 of the 4 would probably make a point of putting some sort of environmental language in a CANZUK free trade deal.
Yeah, making sure we're being as environmentally friendly as possible, I would assume. So obviously we've talked a lot about general politics and stuff about CANZUK. You are a councillor. What would you say your biggest achievement has been, if you can think of any, in your time?
Oh, well, this is going to be probably the least, and I'm not saying that I'm an interesting guest by definition, but this is probably going to be the least interesting. The first year of my first term, I helped push to get a new fire hall built in my particular district. I wasn't alone in that, but it was something that had been people had wanted for years, and I was proud to be part of that. There was a move to bring in a regime where, and this is a really sexy topic, septic tank re-inspections. and I wasn't against it, but just to give you a context, if people are out in the country and they have their systems, if one failed, you'd be out about 15,000 quid to replace it. And we have a very high percentage of our population that are low income. They're fixed income. And if you present them with a repair bill to that extent, you're pretty much kicking them out of their house. You're making it absolutely impossible for them to carry on. So I made a lot of noise about having some sort of affordability plan where people on low incomes and fixed incomes would not have to be presented with a repair bill, which is the equivalent of 2 years net income. And so I was proud of that. There's a few other little things. I'm involved. I chair the Economic Development Committee for my municipality, and there is a hockey arena which sits on the border between my municipality and the one to the south, and I'm on the board for that, and I'm the board chair of it. So I get to hang around a hockey arena and watch all the action. That's a fun part of the job.
Yeah. And obviously, so we're from England. I assume that's ice hockey.
Ice hockey.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When you come over here, don't put ice in front of it.
Yeah.
It's just hockey.
Yeah.
I know hockey means something different over. It's that whole soccer football thing that you have to kind of do the quick. The quick translation, but once you get off the plane at Pearson and you step into Toronto, you got to drop the ice. I mean, it's Canada. It's Canada. There's ice everywhere, so it just goes as a given.
It's an easy assumption to make, then, isn't it? Simon, you said you had something you were going to say.
Yeah, you're being incredibly modest. And one thing, looking back over your career that stood out to me was your involvement as a coordinator in the No MMP referendum in Ontario. And that's a debate that rears its head over here as well. We've got similar political structures, but what is it about first past the post versus proportional representation that you think makes for stronger or more representative or accountable government?
I have to kind of nerd out a bit on this in terms of we are so used to political parties here and in the UK and everywhere. We just feel that, these are institutions that have been around since forever. and they dominate our political discourse. And yet they really came about as a means to an end. And, the basis of our parliamentary system, both yours and ours here, is that you have a defined geographical territory, and those areas can get together and elect a representative to serve, at the national level, or we have, we're federal, so we have a provincial level. And that's the system. Political parties came about as a means of arbitrating power, trying to build a coalition. The one we have this situation. It might surprise. I'm completely nonpartisan when I'm a local councillor, because political parties are banned at the local level in Ontario and most provinces. So you don't get Conservatives, Liberals, New Democrats, which are our version of Labour. We don't get that. So we come in all as independents. And we all kind of know each other's political views, but we come in as open and honest brokers to one another and work things out. And there are people that, quite frankly, don't vote the same way as I do federally or provincially, but we work together on this because, we're focused on the good. What I don't like about proportional representation, MMP, and some of these plans is it's based around the political party as an institution. And I don't feel political parties are institutions. If you take the basis of your political system away from the geographical area, the riding or constituency, and you base it with a partisan organization, you are disenfranchising people by definition. So you're going to build a system that's not designed to represent communities, but better represent Labor or Conservative or Lib Dem or here Liberal and NDP. If your focus is to try to increase seat count for a given party, these are great plans. But if your purpose is to elect someone who's going to represent a given jurisdiction and speak out on issues in that jurisdiction, it's not an improvement. And I've always been opposed to it because I think it puts power in the hands of party bosses and takes it away from people in constituencies.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it provides that good balance between representation on the one hand and accountability on the other. And congratulations, by the way. I understand that you won overwhelmingly in favor of first past the post.
So what happened was the province was broken into different areas, and we were on a shoestring budget. This is an interesting thing with referendums, and I really appreciated Brexit the way it went, because we were in a situation where we were being outspent easily 100-1. The trade unions and other organizations were full bore on for mixed member proportional, and they were spending money, and they had professional lawn signs and everything. We were essentially passing the collection plate and doing things on our own. We didn't have a machine. We were just dedicated people. And I coordinated for all of Eastern Ontario except the city of Ottawa. We had a specific organization there, and we were being outspent, and we were being out lobbied, and they were just. It was almost like Brexit, where Leave was having to go up against this machine, and at the end of the day, I think we had over 70% of the vote, and we had a double majority because you had to get a majority of constituencies and a majority of the vote, and it wasn't even close. And so, given the fact that they spent all that money, I probably my opposite number had tens of thousands of dollars to do his job. And I had maybe $500 and access to a photocopier. Wow. and we still pulled it off. So that was about as David and Goliath as anything I've ever been involved in. And still proud of it to this day, because I think that I think we did the right thing. I think we made the right points. They had the money, but they didn't have the ideas. And ideas, and if you have faith in people and you have faith in the democratic process, you'll believe that ideas and good faith will win in the end.
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow, you left that out when you were talking about your achievements.
Modest.
That was a very good one. That's very good. Laurence,
one of my big achievements is I'm up to light level 1,335 in Destiny 2. Which if I'm sitting at about midnight on a Friday night in the living room and I can't sleep, so I'm on there playing.
Wow. Well done.
I take it that's a game, is it?
What?
Yes,
You've never heard of it?
Yes, it is.
I'm into the sort of FIFA and Sims, so that's my gaming gets. You mentioned earlier about, I think you said your mother-in-law's from the UK. Did you say so? Was it your mother-in-law?
Yeah, my late mother-in-law. So it's sort of a strange story with them. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour. Okay. Once upon a time, just before the outbreak of World War I, there was a English gentleman and his Scottish wife who were living in Vancouver. And they had some kids and, kind of settled. And then the war broke out. He went to fight in the Canadian Army. Sadly, he died, left a widow and the children back in Vancouver. They moved back to Scotland. So that woman would have a daughter who she would get married. And then after the war, when her husband came back, they, along with their daughter, and son, would emigrate to Canada. So what happened was my wife's mother, who spoke English no differently than I do, was born in Dumfries. But her grandmother with the thick Scottish brogue was born in Vancouver. So they would go through customs and say, well, where were you born? So this woman would say, I was born in Dumfries, Scotland. And then turn to the older lady. Where were you born? I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was like you ladies doing some kind of ventriloquism act here or something. Yeah, the woman with the thick Scottish accent was born in Canada, and the woman with the Canadian accent was born in Scotland. So
have you ever been to the UK then?
Yeah, a few times. Last time was in 2019. And I haven't been up into Scotland. I've been to Wales. I've been through England. I a lot of time in and around London and environs, and did have friends that were up in around Manchester, Macclesfield, that area. So that's sort of where I've been when I've been over, but.
So have you seen any UK sports at all? Anything like the Premier League or anything like that you follow?
I do a bit. Go Spurs.
No, not Spurs.
I have to say that it's just very passing following. I'm enough of a Canuck that I, kind of follow things here, baseball and basketball quite a bit because the Raptors have had pretty good success in basketball in the United States. And incidentally, the constituency I live in, it's called Lanark Frontenac Kingston. The national, it's both a federal and provincial constituency. It is the birthplace of James Naismith, who invented basketball.
Oh wow!
So he's our homeboy. He moved to the States to do it, but he's originally from here.
I always wonder how people manage to come up with sports. It's quite a crazy thing to think of, isn't it? Really. But so we've gone through a whole range of questions, and as someone who's seen this before, we're going on to the really tricky personal ones now. So what is our first one? Is you've mentioned you got a high light level in Destiny, but what else do you get up into in your spare time? Do you have any hobbies?
You think I have spare time?
Yeah, I know. I was saying that. I was thinking,
It's like, how's a guy have spare time?
Yeah.
I do like writing, and I'll write some fiction, and I've played around with that. I would say that if there's something that I sort of enjoy, like it's like anything, I enjoy music. I can't play, but my son is he's a kick-ass guitarist. He really is really good. I'll give you a plug. He went to a club in Kingston, just to the south of us, and two of his high school friends, they have a band that is booked in March to play Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. So, it's he's not in a band, but he's been playing for years, and he's really good. And he took radio broadcasting in college, so he could be a DJ, and he's doing some podcasting stuff. So I sort of learn about stuff through him, because he's cool and he has really good taste, and I don't. But if there was something that I kind of like, classic movies. I love movies, the sort of that golden era of Hollywood, or even some of the.
What do you mean? So golden is in is that 60s, or is it?
Oh, I would say anything from like. I'll look at some stuff from the silent era. It's kind of interesting.
Oh,
late silent.
Yeah.
But classic, I would say like through the 1930s to maybe the early 1960s. It's sort of, kind of, I would say you're looking in the British stuff, the stuff that Alexander Korda did, and some of the early stuff that people like Hitchcock did before they made the move to the States. I've gotten into that stuff. And I'm really a fan of that. It's just good writing, and I really appreciate good writing. And back in those days, because I could nerd out a bit, there's authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald would be brought in as screenwriters. And so when you're hearing the dialogue, these are people that are famous authors. And the one thing I didn't realize, there was a 1930s version of Pride and Prejudice that went out, and Laurence Olivier played Darcy and Greer Garson played Elizabeth Bennet, but the screenplay was written by Aldous Huxley. So, I mean, you've got people that, they would write, the writing is crisp, and you also, you sort of, it has a garage band feel. Because if you're it's not like Michael Bay where you can just like CGI some crap in and blow some stuff up, to keep people attended. You didn't have that, so you had to have it's black and white, so we don't have colors. So the way they would do the shading and they had to improvise. They're almost like a garage band. It's like we don't have the equipment of the pros. So we're just going to hobble something together as best we can. And I appreciate that because it shows creativity.
Yeah. It's a bit like our studio setup at the moment then.
or mine.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me on to do you have any favorite songs? What would you say your top kind of 3 songs are? You into much music?
I am. It's I'm kind of older. One of the best concerts that I went to years ago, there was a triple bill. I wasn't keen on the opening act. It was the Sugar Cube, so it was Bjork, right? And it's like, I know that there's a certain crowd you can't say anything, but obviously Bjork is not my cup of tea. But the next act was Public Image Limited. So Johnny Rotten was, and he was. It was at the C&E Grandstand in Toronto, and it was where the Toronto Blue Jays played before they got the big stadium. So he was in the outfield on a golf cart, and he was hanging off the end, yelling on a remote mic, "Get off your effing asses, you lazy Canadians!" And it was great. But they in turn were the opening for New Order, and that was a really good concert. So that was a lot of when I was in college, like Depeche Mode and Echo and the Bunnymen, and where I'm going with this. But I've always had very eclectic tastes. I grew up in an area where country music was quite big. Very first concert I ever attended in my life was at that very same venue when I was a little kid, and my mom and dad were dragging me along, and it was Johnny Cash. So. Wow. So, it's only recently, it's like, ooh, Johnny Cash is cool. Wouldn't have been cool at that time, right? But, and there's I'll listen to a lot of alternative. I do like alternative. I'm just trying to think of some groups. A lot of it's kind of a mix between 80s new wave and present alternative. Like one group, St. Vincent. I really like them.
Nice. So I'm going to ask what your favorite kind of TV shows are. You obviously said you like the older films. What about the older TV shows? I'm going to quickly steal what Laurence is going to ask, have you seen The Crown?
You know I was going to ask that.
Do it every time. Every time.
Should I save my answer of yes until he asks, or should I? I just said.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I did. And you know what? I took it in the spirit it was given. I'm a hardcore monarchist, and my family left Connecticut in the 1780s with about as much as they could pile on an ox cart out of loyalty to the crown. So I don't think a Netflix show isn't going to budge me on that.
No. What about other shows then? What kind of shows?
Do you know the one that I'm really getting into right now is Succession. I really like it. Yeah, I love it. Brian Cox and some others. Matthew McFadden is in it. I think it's on Sky in your part of the world, but it's on HBO here and in the United States. I really like it. It's just it makes me laugh, and it's just such dark comedy. You're watching this dysfunctional rich family, and it's funny because we actually have a version of that happening in Canada in real time.
Oh, really?
One of the biggest telecom firms in this country is Rogers Telecommunications, probably one of the biggest cell phone things. That they own television stations, radio stations, and that. And the family, which essentially controls about 90% of the voting shares in the company,
wow,
they're in a pissing match with each other, which is worthy of Succession.
Oh, wow.
and it's funny because people were making jokes and people were saying, "Oh, it's like HBO's Succession," and I said, "No, it's like HBO's Succession if it was performed by the Lower Podunk Regional Community Theater, because it's kind of like a low rent version of it.
Yeah.
It's sad as can be, and they're taking on Twitter like there's this woman who's ripping on her brother who's chairman of the board, and they're fighting over this. So it's like if you've ever watched Succession, we're experiencing that in real time here. And I stopped being a Rogers customer about 3 months ago, so dodged a bullet.
I've Simon pointed me in the direction of, I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of it. It's Yes Minister.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I've only discovered that recently, and fantastic show.
Yeah, although I'm also a fan of The Thick of It.
Yeah. I watched that one after. I personally preferred Yes Minister. I think it was just I don't know, there was something about it I just thought was very, very clever.
Well, I got BritBox through Amazon Video, so I can stream both, and I will go back and forth. And depending on the mood I'm in, I'll it's like, am I
if
in
you're
a
in
mood?
angry mode, would you watch the thick of it?
Oh yeah, it's like, am I feeling like Humphrey Appleby today or Malcolm Tucker? It's just, and there are days when you do definitely feel like more one than the other.
Yeah, certainly. So go on then, Laurence. Do you want to just quickly say, have you watched The Crown? He has said yes, but you're welcome to ask him.
Have you watched The Crown?
Yes.
Oh, okay, lovely. So, Lou, we'll stick with the camera on you, Laurence. This is the final question.
I can't remember.
Unless, Simon, did you have a question? Do we just take away from Laurence's moment? No?
Don't interrupt me when I'm talking.
No, fine, go ahead.
Don't get to talk that often, so don't ruin my moment. I'm sure you know what I'm about to ask you because it's my one important question. Have you ever tried Marmite and do you like it? Did you just meet me?
Okay, so yes, I knew you were going to ask that question. No, I have not tried Marmite. I have no idea whether I like it or not.
Oh.
But I have some right here.
This is fantastic.
We're going to do it live.
Wow.
Oh, I'm way ahead of you on this one. I'm actually breaking the seal on this, just because I want people to know that this is a legitimate taste test.
I feel left out now. I feel I should have some. I'm well, Joe.
The commitment here. Well, did you just seriously? He just said, "Well, Joe." He did.
This is a British institution in a jar.
Yeah.
So there, I've got a little
this is
dab
great.
there.
You can have a bit more than that on there. I mean, you can't get the taste.
No.
Well, you're really going to make me double up on this stuff, right?
You either love it or you hate it.
Oh no! Oh, wait for it.
He hasn't spat it out.
Damn, that's intense.
Wow. Is that good intense?
Is that good or bad? Is that what's the verdict?
It's interesting.
I'm taking it as a win. I'm taking it as a yes.
I guess it's not a no.
No, it just tastes like somebody mixed onion rings with something or other. You can taste that onion in it. I read the label and it said something about onion, and I thought, damn, okay, well, I'm reading. You know, it's one of these things where you read the label and you say, how the hell do these things go together? Like there had to have been some guy at the point in time who said, yeah, let's mix yeast and carrots and dehydrated onions. I was like, what the heck? Like, I mean, you'll hear these things where somebody invents something where, I don't know, they left a pot on the stove and it went too long. And it's like, oh, it turned out to be like this wonderful thing.
Popcorn or something.
Like popsicles, leaving the juice out on the step and it freezing. So I get that. But what accident where it's saying, hey, let's throw all this stuff into a pot and see what happens? And it's like, oh, let's call it Marmite. How do you get to that point? I don't. That's not something you trip over, you know.
No, you have to be in a very creative mood. It's the whole thing, like making a cake. You got all this stuff you've added together, and then someone's like, that chicken has just given birth. Let's add that. Like, it's a whole mix of stuff, isn't it? So
I think I'm taking that as a win that he does like it. Because I've got to get the numbers up.
Okay, so look, I would. Would I have it again? Yeah, like I wouldn't turn it down. Like, am I going to, if somebody says, hey, there's a really great restaurant down the road, they've got this Marmite special.
That wouldn't take your fancy.
That's quite a good sell.
I would just say what they got on tap, right?
Yeah.
like you know, if you've got something decent on tap, I could probably get talked into it.
Try it on toast. It tastes better on toast, I think. The worst I've ever heard is someone say that it tastes like earwax. I mean, I don't know who eats earwax. Wow. The person who said that it tastes like it, obviously, but
well, yeah, I can never figure out those comparisons. Yeah. Like,
I know what earwax tastes like.
It tastes like a rusty screw.
Yeah, well, then stop eating rusty screws, I'd say.
Well, Laurence, that sounds like you have got a number you can put on yours now. That's you've let me down slightly, but a massive thank you for coming on, and massive thank you for tasting Marmite live on our show. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, anything for the cause.
Yeah,
I want to have a closing thought.
Oh, go ahead.
You guys are to be commended. And let me put it this way: 20 odd, roughly 20 years ago, the whole constituency that we would identify as, CANZUK or the Commonwealth movement, you could have fit in a large sedan. I mean, I could fit that number of people worldwide in this room. And the idea was that we wanted to have a movement that people would embrace and call their own. This wasn't something that we created and said, everybody buy into it. Not like a pyramid scheme where you're feeding the people at the top. The idea was join, add to it, add to the body of work, and make it your own. So everybody has an opportunity to be a thought leader in this wonderful endeavor. And you guys took the ball and you ran with it. And you're to be commended for that, because, some of the old guys like us, we're glad when you guys take the baton and you run down the field. You put joy in our hearts, because there's more and more people, and everybody's embracing it and calling it their own and adding to the knowledge. And you're taking it in directions that sometimes we didn't envision, but it's been a great thing to watch, and it's really heartening. So,
thank you so much.
Each one of you, your viewers who are watching this, and this is what I'm going to say to all of them: get out there and be a leader in this. If you feel passionate about CANZUK and building this Commonwealth network, don't ask for somebody to hire you. Be your own leader. Be your own boss. Come out, do stuff. Because quite frankly, there's always room at the table. There's always room at the table. And there's nothing that makes you feel good at seeing, if I go on Twitter and I get all these CANZUK accounts following me, it's like, oh my God, it's wonderful. All these people, because that there are passionate people on the other side of these things. And I've made so many good friends over the years. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for everybody, in particular what you guys are doing. And you're to be commended for it.
Well, thank you so much. That is a lovely way. I don't know how to come off of that. That was just very nice. I certainly appreciate it. I assume you two do as well. So yeah, thank you for the comments, and thank you so much for coming on.
No worries, anytime.
I want to speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Take care.